Hi. I got sound.
Anybody speak with Amy today? Yeah. Real low energy.
Welcome, everyone, to the Chicago Wilderness Cafe. Please keep yourself on mute. We're going to get started here in a few minutes, but as you join, um, we're going to, everyone would be muting. There we go. Welcome. My name is Laura Riley. We're going to give it a few minutes for everyone to join us for this cafe. In the meantime, just please keep yourself on mute. We're going to have time for question and answer. And at that point, you'll be able to unmute yourself or put your questions into the chat, and we'll be monitoring the chat with our team here today. This session will be recorded, and a recording and a PDF of the slide will be shared on our website after the event, so you can share it and watch it later with your staff or others. All right. Welcome. My name is Laura Riley. I'm the Managing Director of Chicago Wilderness Alliance. And thank you for joining us for today's cafe, Going to Referendum, Successful Mobilization for Local Conservation and Forest Preserve Districts. And I want to give a quick thanks to our sponsors, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Urban and Community Forestry Program, and the U.S. Forest Service. Their support helps us bring these cafes to you. And with that, I want to introduce the first speaker, Benjamin Cox, the Executive Director of the Friends of the Forest Preserves. Benjamin.
Hello, thanks, Laura. So today we want to share with you sort of our best practices and our lessons learned from our effort in 2022, even starting a couple years before that, to pass a referendum here in Cook County for the forest preserves. The theme of today's presentation will be over and over again that there were lots and lots of us that worked on this together. It was a large group that helped lead this effort. We had a large coalition. We had strong support from some civic leaders who helped really shepherd the referendum and raise money for it. And I won't list everyone's names because I will surely forget some folks. You'll see group names coming up in a minute. Two folks that I do want to mention right off the bat, though, were Wendy Paulson, who I think might be here with us, was the Bobolink Foundation and long-term conservationist, lifelong conservationist, and actually gets out leading bird walks and doing volunteer days here in Cook County on a regular basis and in other places across the country and the world even. And Steve Baird, who's with the Trust for Public Land as a longtime leader, volunteer, and also a huge conservationist with a family history of that doing it. They really helped lead this effort, and it's a nice opportunity to thank them again and welcome them to share anything. I'm not sure Steve's here, but I think Wendy is. So again, we'll do our lessons learned and sort of we'll start with best practices. You'll hear from me and a number of other folks, and I've invited my other steering committee members from the campaign to jump in if I miss anything. So for Friends of the Forest Preserves, our history is we're 25 years old. We've got 2,500 members. We've got nearly 20,000 social media contacts and email contacts. And all of that's to say is that we have a lot of influence and connection with the commissioners in a good way. the commissioners that lead the forest preserves here in Cook County. We've seen a big turnaround in the forest preserves. We were founded because there were huge issues, and we worked hard with the district at the table to get things done with a lot of partner organizations. We're always going in together and doing this work together because it's, there's strength in numbers. If you want to influence politicians, you either have votes or money or connections. In this campaign, we used a little bit of connections. We did raise a decent amount of money, but we really had a lot of votes and a lot of influence. And that's where it started, was working together with some organizations like Trust for Public Land and the Nature Conservancy early to get the information we needed to get started in the right way, to know that we actually had a campaign that we could probably win, and really pull together all the parts and pieces to start to talk to the commissioners about, and to make sure we had their support. We also did a lot of work to think about who to have on the steering committee with us. It was a large group of other nonprofit organizations that helped lead. Some of the biggest ones, like the Brookfield Zoo and the Chicago Botanic Garden, which are also on the Forest Preserve property, helped us. They're separate nonprofits, but they get some funding from the Forest Preserve, so they helped in a big way too. So Emily, I think we can jump right into the campaign structure here. Although I see Alicia's hand up, I think.
I just wanted to make sure, but oh, there we go. Moving along to the next slide. Wanted to make sure that we're okay with that.
Yeah.
Benjamin, can you talk a little bit about the Next Century Conservation Plan and how that kind of helped set up the referendum?
So there was really Friends of the Forest Preserves and Audubon had pushed for a long time for a subset, smaller idea of a plan. We were always trying to raise money to do conservation work and do restoration projects, and we'd say, hey, we can get money over here, and the district would say, well, we don't want to work there right now. We're like, where do you want to work? So we know where to raise money for. And really, the district, under the leadership of President Tony Preckwinkle, General Superintendent Arnold Randall, they came out with a plan that was much bigger and broader than the one that we had worked on. It was really led by Open Lands, along with a lot of other partners that helped chip in on it. And that plan was, celebrated the 100-year anniversary of the Forest Preserves, there were kind of 3 different dates in the 2010s. This was the first Forest Preserve district in the country. This Cook County model, this model of a county-based conservation district started in Cook County here in Illinois. It's the largest and it's the oldest, and this plan really helps lead the way. And I think that came out in like 2016, I want to say, and we still use it today. There's a steering committee that Wendy helped lead for years, and now it's led by Alan Bell. The Conservation and Policy Council, and then there's a steering committee under that I help lead with Forest Preserve staff. And there's a lot of other folks that come to the table on a regular basis to really, again, work at the table, to really push policy in the right direction. We've come out with white papers and done just a lot of really great things that help sort of help shape the direction and really have turned the Forest Preserves around. That also helped groups like ours say, okay, we're ready to go to bat for you for a referendum. There was a time not that many years ago where we would not have done that. We just didn't think they were ready yet. The Forest Preserve really was a mess. These folks, again, at their sort of 10-year anniversary around 2020, there was a celebration, 2021. And we saw a presentation from Tony and from Superintendent Randall. And we really saw like, okay, wait, yeah, they've really checked most of the boxes. We've really gone in the right direction. We feel comfortable now marshaling our troops to come out and help pass this referendum. You can see here on the slide, there's only a 9% increase, and we could go on and on about why, but basically the state legislature locked financing down for local governments a long time ago. They could only grow by natural growth each year. It's basically based on inflation, and they could only do that. They didn't. That wasn't automatic. They had to vote to do that themselves, and often the Forest Preserve didn't do that. The other thing that's interesting that happened here with the referendum is that COVID-19 helped. It's surprising, but because the Forest Preserves of Cook County stayed open, the Park District in Chicago was not open, a lot of other things weren't open. This was a place that people got out to, and they saw the usage of the Forest Preserves go from about 63 million visits a year to well over 100 million visits a year. And people were talking about the forest preserves and thinking about them and loving them. And it was, a place of refuge, which is really a key part of the mission from even the 19 teens when the forest preserves were founded. I think we can skip to that next slide there. So yeah, we've got friends here. I think, on this slide, I'd add open lands, I'd add, Illinois Environmental Council, and I would keep going for a very long time about who really helps. But early on, we had actually talked to the Trust for Public Land had talked to the commissioners a few years back about running a referendum, and they weren't ready, and the polling wasn't quite right. And then we actually had an effort at the 2020 election where we were going to go to referendum, and there was that fair tax on the ballot, and the governor asked Tony Preckwinkle to pull it off the ballot at that time. That actually, it would have been very easy to pass then. It's a presidential election. We were going to go in the primary. You get a lot of Democratic voters out in Cook County for the primary. It would have been an easy time to do it. But I'll tell you, it was a benefit to conservation in the region and really in the state for us to not have gone then. It would have been too simple. It wouldn't have been as big of a campaign. It wouldn't have had the impact that it ended up having, which we can talk about more. The Trust for Public Land and the Nature Conservancy do these referenda across the country on a regular basis. They do, voter initiatives to raise money for conservation. Friends of the Forest Preserves, Open Lands, and others, we've got a deep history with the Forest Preserves of really trying to help them do a better job. So we were able to go to the table and sit with commissioners and talk to them about why this was important and to get their support. And they actually voted it on the ballot sooner than it was the summer before, so in 2021. And that actually was too early, but we wanted to make sure they were going to say yes this time before we got going. So they had to vote on it again because you have to do it within a 6-month window of the election, or maybe it's 9 months, whatever it was, but we were outside of that window. So it was great. We got them 100% of the vote from all the commissioners twice for the referendum. And it was a lot of work of sitting down with them in small groups, some individually, because, you have to do that. If you have too many, there's a quorum and, open meetings and things. But I went often with Jennifer Bader from the Brookfield Zoo and other folks. We would have these meetings with the commissioners. And there was also some heavy negotiating about where's this money going to go? We all need to be on the same page before we all say yes, because we're not just raising this money and letting it go into the ether. This has to be, we have to be in agreement on what, how the money was going to be divvied up into different buckets and spent on, things that we all care about. And it's mainly restoration, land acquisition, programs, jobs for kids and adults. And then the other nice thing is we fixed the Forest Preserves pension problem. We know that Illinois governments, many of them have pension issues, and this one is resolved. It's solved with this referendum. If we can skip to the next one. Emily, you want to add anything to that?
Not necessarily. I would just underline the importance of, for many of us who sat on the steering committee, this was our first referendum campaign. We're lucky in our region to have Brooke McDonald at the Conservation Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, and Trust for Public Land all having a background and expertise in these kind of ballot initiatives. So really underline, if any of you are to go to referendum in the future, the importance of bringing that expertise on early and referring to them often, because they've really had a strong success rate and can offer a lot of assistance and helpful insight into how to do particular things, and the questions around what you can do are really important to have. So use those folks early and often.
Yes, there's wonderful expertise there, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Lean on them as much as you can. They're happy to help. It's something that they do on a regular basis, and they really need the help of the local groups to be able to do it well. So they're very used to working with folks, and they're very welcoming. And again, Brooke and the Conservation Foundation have, they've done 14 of these in the past in the collar counties. It's been a little while, but we're excited to see how many conservation and forest preserve districts are looking to go to the ballot soon. We don't know who's, sort of definite or not. They're, they're in the quiet phase and the early phase, which we'll talk more about soon. But it's looking really exciting, and there'll be an incredible amount of money raised for conservation through this in the region, which is just wonderful. We'll talk a little bit here about the actual campaign structure. So, we literally came up with a name. We started a separate nonprofit for it. It's a 501c4. Donations to this are not tax deductible. We had, sort of the public campaign committee in the front, led by Steve and Wendy. There was a bunch of folks that helped them. They were people that were able to pick up the phone and call the right folks to talk to about helping to support this. To really support the effort financially, but also with their influence. The other, the reason is, I keep saying there's a lot of folks that were involved. There was a big involvement, 167 coalition members, a lot of people on the steering committee, a lot of people there's 4 separate committees underneath the steering committee. We'll look at that in a minute. But it was all about, getting out there in front of folks, targeting our messaging, but also it's about who you know. Tuesday I had to vote for some folks that I didn't know a lot about, and I know exactly my friend to call and say, tell me about who's on the ballot for this particular entity here in Cook County, and tell me what the inside story on who I ought to be voting for or not. And that's the same thing I think that happened extensively with the referendum. So we wanted to make sure that there were at least names in the committee that, on the coalition, that if folks got on the website and looked at it, they'd say, well, if that organization supports it, then I'm comfortable voting for it. And that those folks were able to pass out the information, send it out through social media or through mailers or presentations, through volunteers, and to really, again, spread the word in a grassroots kind of way. There was a steering committee above that. I think is that on the next slide, I believe? Yeah, okay. Public Campaign Committee, Steve and Wendy, and a bunch of other really great civic leaders. Steering committee was it fluctuated. So I'm going to say 12 to 15 organizations. We met at first every couple of weeks, and then we started meeting weekly. Quick, easy, get stuff done kind of, Zooms, but keeping us all on the same page. And then there were the 4 committees under it. Advocacy was one that did their work early to get the commissioners to vote for this and to make sure that they were comfortable. It helped that we had the support of the county board president for that. She carries a lot of weight with how the other commissioners, vote. But they each really needed to have their questions answered. Coalition building committee, that was a massive effort. Everybody calling everyone they knew. We made a giant list of any organization we could think of. It was way beyond the choir. I think this is really key to a successful campaign. We were getting, of course, we had all the conservation organizations and the museums and the ones that were allowed to sign on, and the zoo and the garden and on like that. But we also had, local theater groups and churches and unions. That was probably one of the biggest wins for us, was to get a couple of the unions on. We had businesses, athletic groups, that use the forest preserves. And there was just so many more organizations. Anyone that would sign on, agree to support it and share it out via social media, we added their name to the coalition. Communications committee is just that. I think that's pretty straightforward. They're talking about, how to share the information to the coalition so that they could use it, share it via social media. And finance was really led by Ken Modilewski at the Nature Conservancy, along with a bunch of the rest of us that really, made sure that the campaign committee and each one of the organizations had what they needed to make the ask and help us raise over $3.1 million for this campaign. Cook County's huge. I mean, it's bigger than a lot of countries. It's one of the largest, it's 15th largest government in the United States. That number fluctuates, so I'll just say 15. But by budget, it's almost $10 billion a year now. It's over 5 million people. It's a much different effort in Cook County than it will be in the collar counties, not to minimize it, but I think, we just really had to make sure we won. There's a lot of pressure from my colleagues who said, you can't lose, you have to win. If you lose, you're going to mess this up for everyone else. So Prince was eager to be the best friend of the forest preserve, the kind that'll tell them when they're doing something wrong, but also really go to bat for them. and to make sure that we could get this passed and to work really hard at that. But Emily, you want to add a little here?
Yeah, and I just want to highlight Benjamin's leadership in this entire campaign was huge. He was there from beginning to end and really steering the steering committee and all the initiatives moving forward. So we were very grateful for his leadership throughout. I'd just add that, not every committee is going to be working all the time.
Right.
As Benjamin said, the advocacy committee was really busy in lead up to getting the measure on the ballot. The communications committee, we were really busy in the beginning as we were formulating our talking points and our campaign strategy, and then kind of went quiet for a little while. And then we're really busy there at the end when we were getting ready for the public phase of the campaign. I would say the one committee that were pretty consistent was the finance and, doing that fundraising effort and the coalition building. All these committees had steering committee members leading it, but this was also an opportunity again to build that coalition. People who sat on the advocacy communications coalition building committee did not have to also sit on the steering committee. So for advocates that maybe don't have as much time to give to a campaign, but want to participate in some way, this is a great way to, again, broaden that coalition and get a diversity of perspectives and voices involved.
I do have to say, and I want to say this very clearly, this was a lot of fun. Conservation, environmental stuff can be so doom and gloom. It can be sort of, even restoration, you start, when are you finished? We're clearing brush. There's other things to do. When, you look back, you're like, all right, we got a lot done today, but look at that whole next section, whatever. This had a start and an end. It was a lot of fun. You're hanging out with your colleagues. You're meeting a lot of new people. It was super exciting to watch. And you got, a whole new world of things to learn. We'll talk more about the experts that we hired to help us with this. And it just, again, it was really a fun experience. A lot of good volunteer involvement, a lot of boots on the ground. It was a lot of fun. We're going to talk some about the difference between the silent phase versus the public phase, and
I think we can go to the next slide for that.
The main difference there between the silent phase and the quiet and the public phase or the quiet phase is that you don't want to give any opposition the time to get organized and well-funded so that they can come out against you. If you know you've got opposition, you could really consider, it's a good thing to have quiet conversations with them. Try and find out early, because honestly, if you do get solid, well-funded opposition, your chances of winning go way down. And so we knew there were a couple of folks we should be concerned with. The Realtors Association was one. They just kind of said, we're not supporting this, but we won't come out against it. We were like, thank you very much, and we all went home happy. There was another person that had a lot to do with the Governor Priskert's effort there, the fair tax not making it. And we fortunately had that influence. We had someone who knew that person who could call them and have a private conversation and say, hey, we know you've got this thing with the fair tax. What about this forest preserve thing? And they also said they would leave it alone. And that's all we needed. We didn't need their support. We didn't need, it would have been nice. We didn't need their money, but as long as they just let us run this campaign and not come out in a big way. So there was that sort of that quiet, let's not raise a bunch of money and then just get obliterated, by someone else's negative campaign against us. Some of the other things that you'll see here, you can see, sort of some of the official things that we had to do, starting a 501c4, bank accounts, legal counsel that was pro bono. That's actually kind of easy to find. People are eager to help, law firms are eager to help nonprofits. Building the coalition that went on from very early, long before this August 21 date, went months and months before that. I would say at least in January of 2021, maybe even before that, because we were pulling together other folks to get to work, even before that. Again, we wanted to make sure we had a good, public campaign committee to help us through the fundraising. We had the commissioners vote for it in the summer. I think it was the July meeting of 2021, but then they needed to do it again because there's like a timeline thing that was required by state law. Just see how we kept then, we're still in the quiet phase. We're working through doing fundraising. At some point, sort of spring, summer 2022, coming up to the referendum, we did another set of polling. We also did start having the organizations send a message out to their groups, a little bit, less quiet, but still to the choir. And then it wasn't until really after Labor Day that we went full public campaign phase, and we'll talk more about consultants that we hired, but where we really were out there on social media, in print, on the radio, and really targeted radio, depending on who needed, based on the polling, who needed the most sort of influence, TV ads, mailers. I mean, we did it all. Texting, and basically we decided that we would hire a team of rivals. So we didn't have one organization that did all of that for us. We hired someone for TV, someone for print, someone for radio. We had different folks doing the different aspects, so that when we would have our weekly meetings about that, we could say, okay, here's how much we've raised, here's how much we'll put into this is how much we'll put into that. I think we should do, we really need to hammer this some more. We need to find this community through, and here's the best way to do that, through the radio or through mailers. It was different per community, and different, for different individuals. You really, through the polling, you can find out if you need help in the African American community on the West Side, or if you need help in the Latinx community, or if we knew that women voters in the suburbs would be very helpful to us, especially ones over a certain age. So we were really targeting them with mailers and things. So that you find all that out by working with the right folks and really, doing making the right choices on where to spend the money and how to direct it.
I think we can go to the next slide. Yep.
Yeah, so we talked through some of this, the administrative prep, administrative, legal, and financial infrastructure. At that same time, you're sort of making sure the commissioners are in good shape. That was a little bit before that. They literally have to vote to make sure the thing is on the ballot. Then once they vote to put it on the ballot, at least in Cook County, and I know other counties might have a different thought on this, the Forest Preserve staff or the Conservation District staff, at least for Cook County, could not be involved anymore. They couldn't say vote yes. They were allowed to say, this is what we need, and this is why we need it. This is why we're great, and this is what we've done to make things better. They could do all that. They literally could not say, please vote for this. They could show up at a presentation with an advocate and answer people's questions and talk about the state of the forest preserve and that sort of thing. But again, they weren't allowed to actually talk about it. The one thing on here that I would add, and this is lesson learned, but I'll add it here because we should have done it at this point during the quiet phase early, was to get with that creation of the separate 501c4, which is a different sort of model that allows you to do campaigning with all the funds that you raise. We should have also gone to the U.S. Postal Service and got our indicia for nonprofits where you get a discounted rate, and we just didn't get that done. So we ended up spending extra money on our mailers as a result of that. There's one more part of that council, count, complete polling. Yes, and these things definitely scale depending on the size of the campaign. Polling might be that you've got 70% of the vote. All you really need to do is, a month, 2 months before, send out some basic things so people aren't surprised by it on the ballot. But like, don't stir the pot, win. Just go ahead and win. Don't spend a lot of money. Don't bring in a lot of attention to yourselves. Make sure people know it's coming, and make sure that you win. I think now we're getting into.
Yeah, I think it's me now.
Yeah, good.
My name is Emily Reisberg. I'm the Vice President of Conservation and Policy at Open Lands, and was very happy to be a part of the steering committee of this super fun campaign, and lead the communications committee as well as participate in the steering committee. So one of the things that is really important as you're running a campaign or thinking about launching a campaign to go to referendum is really thinking about key messages as defined by the science. So I think one of the successes of the Vote Yes campaign was really looking at that polling data and developing strong polls so that we understood, they have a thing called an uninformed ballot test, which is looking at the ballot language and saying if the vote happened today, how would you vote as a voter and resident? And that was pretty good polling for Vote Yes, but the information that happens after that is testing a lot of different messages. So if you knew that this would restore 15,000 acres of additional land, or this would provide jobs for people in the community, if this helped protect water sources, all these different messages were tested in our polling. And the top line messages that came across that most voters were supportive of really dictated how we created the messaging for our campaign. So doing that polling and really referring back to that throughout the campaign, I would say is pretty vitally important. This also helps you understand how to communicate to specific demographics of voters. Not everybody is the same, and so understanding maybe how people in the north side of your county versus the west side think about the forest preserves is really, really important. This was all important too in developing the materials for coalition building and fundraising, as Benjamin outlined, really from August 2021 until September 2022, we were in that quiet phase. But it wasn't, we weren't not talking about it. We were really building the foundation of support so that when we did go public with our, hundreds of thousands of mailers and commercials that reached lots of people throughout the county, that we had a base of support that already existed and we're ready to be loud about it. So you'll see on this slide one of the one sheets that we created, again, being very clear with that poll-driven messaging. We kept what we said in our messages very tight. As someone who loves communications work, I love to get creative with talking points. This was not one of those moments where I exercised that creativity. We really tried to be disciplined with, talking about how it's cleaning air, cleaning water, and protecting habitats and wildlife, providing jobs for people throughout the county. So you would really want to let those messages lead you. During that quiet phase, it was also an important time, again, to build that foundation, not just with the coalition of gathering that foundational support and fundraising, but also with that communication infrastructure. The name of the campaign is important. We worked a lot on getting the website up and the social handles, and we did develop a bit of a digital presence. So really thinking about that quiet phase as you're building up an entirely new digital community sometimes, unless you're going to use an already existing handle. So it was really about gathering email addresses through the coalition building, having coalition members talk to their direct audiences that we knew would be supportive of the referendum. And again, kind of letting the inner circle know about what was happening and building up that support. And then I just want to underline a point that Benjamin made around thinking about opposition. Really be strategic about when and how you're going to that potentially oppositional person. Relationships are really important in thinking about them, people who are trustworthy to that potential opposition, as well as maybe think about timing. I mean, we didn't go to the real estate community until pretty close to the public part of the campaign. and had a really close associate, Steve Baird, be our messenger for that message. And sometimes the best news you can receive is we're not going to take a position because you don't often need support. You don't need to push someone to yes. Sometimes just remaining quiet is a really big win as well. I think we can go to the next slide.
I think we're gonna.
I think this is you, Benjamin.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, good. That's what I was gonna say. I think we're gonna talk about fundraising. So we worked as a group to come up with the materials that we needed to show donors so that they knew exactly what they were funding, why they were funding it, and where the money was going to go, where the money, what the Forest Reserve has now, what they would have after, what their impact would be. This campaign, we can all say with great pride here, and anybody involved with, I think, with Chicago Wilderness could pat themselves on the back that this campaign raised 25 over 40 million dollars a year for the forest preserves of Cook County, which over a 25-year period would be over $1 billion. That's $1 billion for conservation in Cook County alone. That's amazing. We came up with a list, and it was sort of everybody, go deep with their organizations, go to your donor list, talk to everybody that that knows someone. Let's get their names in and do the work to make a plan for each person to raise funds. I think some of the campaigns in the smaller counties wouldn't be nearly as much money. You still need to raise some money to be able to do these efforts. Then you're really assigning asks to, especially the public campaign committee members or people like myself or other leaders of nonprofits that could ask folks. And then familiarizing yourself with the legal technicalities. One of the biggest misnomer or misconceptions for nonprofits is that you can't do anything with elections, and you can't do anything with individuals that are running for office. The C4s can, but a 501c3 cannot. You cannot get involved in electoral politics. You can get involved in policy, and that's what this is. This is saying we want to change the amount of money that taxpayers pay. Taxpayers are voting to do that themselves. They get to choose. That was a really big message for the commissioners. You're not raising taxes. The people are going to choose to do that for themselves. The polling says they probably will. We're going to do a campaign that helps them realize that they should, and we'll make sure that enough people vote for it. You're not raising taxes. They don't want to do that, but people get to vote on it themselves. And each nonprofit, you can spend up to 20-25% of your time, confirm with your lawyer if you want to be most comfortable with it, working on this kind of campaign. You can use nonprofit, tax deductible resources for your time to be able to do that. We would report it every couple of weeks. We would report into the campaign, and it got filed with the state and federal filings that were required as part of the campaign. Again, great support, TPL, the Trust for Public Land, Nature Conservancy knowing how to do that stuff. And also we hired a firm to do that for us. It wasn't a lot of money. And they did all the filings. We'd all report in. They'd remind us to do it. We'd say, I spent, 10 hours in the last 2 weeks on this. And you turn that in, you say what your time is worth. If any of your other staff did it, you turn that in also. It's totally legal to do that. We did some mailings. It's legal to do that. We put it in our newsletter and social media, etc. Again, I would recommend, to be most comfortable, talk to a pro bono attorney about that, whoever your folks are at your organization. As the campaign sort of, as we got closer, we needed more money. We even went back to some folks and said, hey, we really want to be able to do some targeted radio in specific communities. That's really essential. We're seeing the polling's telling us that. We've done an additional round of polling the summer before, so in that summer of 2022, and we're like, we really need to get into these communities to make sure they know why it's important to vote for this. And folks jumped in. They wrote checks at the last minute to really help us. We just could not lose. We had to win. And it took a good chunk of money to cover this large county with a large population.
And I'll also add, Cook County had not been to referendum since, when was it, Benjamin? Like
the last time they even tried was in 1930, and that was part of funding the Brookfield Zoo.
So that's also why our campaign was so much larger, because we had just not done this essentially before. Other districts have been to referendum within the last 20 years, so you can refer back to those budgets, but this was a big lift.
Yeah, we had to win. I said that 9 times. Okay, I think we're on to
Coalition building.
Lisa
So,
and Carolyn. Thank you.
yeah. Hi, I'm Carol. I'm the Illinois State Director for Trust for Public Land. And I just want to make it clear that it's my colleague that has all the deep expertise in this campaign finance work. But I worked locally on the Coalition Building Committee as well as on the steering committee. And so Benjamin and Emily both have mentioned the importance of the coalition a couple of times already. And I think that just underscores how important it is that it's woven in to the very fabric of the whole campaign. It's not a nice to have, but it's really essential to make this campaign work. And they mentioned a few reasons why. One is that you want other people to see how broad your support is. We put this list of over 167 organizations that we recruited on the website. When people went to go look at it, say, oh, well, if this organization is there, it must be good. So they were sort of a way that organizations could vouch for each other and vouch for the value of this campaign. It's also, as Emily suggested earlier, a really key way to get the message out. Every one of these organizations has their own networks and their own constituencies. And so this allowed the campaign to really tap into a much broader array of constituents at a pretty deep level. So that was really important. And then Benjamin also mentioned this earlier, but again, I want to just underscore it. It was really important to reach out to people who are not the usual suspects. Conservation organizations, yes, but also churches, unions, arts organizations. Who are the user groups, the registered user groups that come into the forest preserves, the bike people, the kayak people, the kite flying people? Who's taking out permits to use the spaces in the forest preserve? What organizations are they affiliated with? And as much as you can dig and find out who that is, that's just one way to build your list. And we recruited these organizations really by, it's not unlike how we recruited or raised funds. Who knows who and who can make the ask? And I think that I think maybe 0 no's once I started talking to people. I had a few people who just didn't respond at all, but I think that just might be because they're overwhelmed if they're a small not-for-profit. But most people, once they heard the message, were just like, organizations that have environmental justice as their focus and developed a stipend system for them to be compensated for some of the work that they were doing on our behalf to help build the coalition. And we thought that was really important to make sure that we had a really broad spectrum of voices that were represented in the effort. And I think Sergio is on from the Illinois Environmental Council. They're the organization that really led this effort. And he can talk a little bit about how we activated these groups when the time came. Sergio, are you out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for teaming me up. I would say some of the most critical ways that we were able to engage folks is through emphasizing the level of historicness that this referendum really represented. Because I think people were really engaged when they came to understand really how significant this was, especially if it's individuals who maybe infrequently visit the forest preserve areas, and might not know the history or kind of the challenges associated with um, uplifting such a unique and expansive natural system. So communicating the fact that it's the first and oldest forest preserve district, and uh, including some other facts about how the number of visitations have increased over the past couple years, especially in the context of COVID, right? There were a lot of people that engaged with nature for the first time, especially since these natural areas might have been the only space for them to really go outside and enjoy some time with others, right? Um, so I think that context also really elevated people's perception of how important nature was, and how much more willing they were to um, participate in educating their family and their neighbors and their entire networks. I see, Hank, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Sergio. It was fun to work with you on this. One thing I would just interject here is that you will find super supporters as you go along with this outreach. Like we found inside the stewardship groups, there's people who belong to Rotary, there are League of Women Voters, or there's neighborhood walkers, or so forth. And they will reach out further if you have ways to stay in touch with them. And of course, that extends the network, maybe to get someone else on the endorsement list, but maybe just to get another group that will take a walk and realize that this is happening and that they can spread the word personally. So you can also use official Forest Preserve resources to the Rotary Club. You don't have to be saying this is a vote yes walk, but somebody on the walk can say, hey, by the way, I'm supporting the referendum. And we did that with a number of different groups that weren't conservation groups per se.
Yeah, that's a great thing to mention, Hank. And I think we can go to the next slide. I mean, you can see on this slide the amazing amount of support, and not just nonprofit organization and community groups, but also for-profit businesses and community groups. So I was on the phone a good amount of time with our now General Superintendent, Eileen Fiegel, to get information from her. So there's not, you can't talk to the Forest Preserve or Conservation District once you're in the campaign mode. Do reach out to them for the information you need to tell the stories and to be connected to the individuals who are most likely to support this referendum. They are a resource for some really great information. One other part of the quiet phase, an important part, is determining your campaign structure. So that means, how much is this going to cost? Okay, we're back. Interviewing and hiring consultants. And what we mean by consultants are really who's going to be doing your digital promotion, your direct voter mail, phones, text, who's going to be getting press for the referendum, and that if you have a big enough campaign, doing TV and radio promotion. There are many reputable firms in the region and nationally. So again, this is a moment to lean into your conservation foundations, nature conservancies, and Trust for Public Lands who have a Rolodex of consultants. You really do want to find consultants who understand how to work campaigns. It's a very kind of different beast than your regular marketing firm. So it's very important to in determining and interviewing these consultants, having that expertise in the room with you from Trust for Public Land or others, as well as having people on the steering committee who know the forest preserves very well. So for Vote Yes, we had a smaller group interviewing those consultants after we had determined our budget. Any good consultant will ask you, where's your polling? What does your polling look like? And so again, you want to have that polling first, and then you determine, what kind of campaign you're running. If your polling tells you it's, that you're 50% yes, and you've got a lot of work to do, that's probably a more expensive campaign than if the polling is telling you that 70% of the population is supportive of the referendum. So that helps you understand how big of a campaign you're running and what kind of consultants you may be looking for. So we had a smaller subset of the steering committee interview and hire those consultants. As Benjamin mentioned, we took a kind of team of rivals approach. We had a different consultant company for each part of the marketing that we did. And we would meet, once every 2 weeks with this group of consultants to talk about what their plans were. They had a certain subset of money that they were given as part of the budget and how they were going to parse that out. So for example, the mailing campaign consultant would say, we have such and such amount of money. We're going to use that money to hit these demographics with mailers, this size mailing, which means this amount of postage, and we're going to send 3 or 4 of those out. And this is the calendar in which we're going to move that forward in. So each 2 weeks, a different consultant was presenting on that strategy. And Will from Trust for Public Land, Isis from the Nature Conservancy, Benjamin, I, and a few others were all discussing how these things weave together to meet our overarching campaign goals. Again, what you do with this type of marketing and campaign work is dependent on the size and scale of your campaign. You may not need TV promotion in McHenry County. It may be majority mailers. So you really want to, again, rely on that polling and that science to determine how you're doing it. We really liked the team of rivals approach, but there have been many campaigns that have been won with just one consultant leading all different aspects of a campaign, and that's really up to you and your steering committee to decide. You can go to the next slide. All right, great. So now we're in the public phase. We've got our polling and we've tested our key messages. I'm going to underline again, really sticking to those messages. Right before we went public, we created a lot of materials for our coalition to utilize. Those were Instagram posts, graphics. Those were one sheets that they could send. We literally wrote out what they could include in their newsletters to try and make it as easy as possible and accessible for organizations of all different sizes to communicate this referendum to their constituents. At this time, like September 1 until voting day, we were activating our entire campaign. So direct mail was going out. We were approving radio spots, things of that nature. One other great way to use coalition building was we had phone banks. So that was something that our super volunteers that Hank talked about could sign up for. And we set up with our consultant the systems in which it would be very easy for them to text different numbers and garner support. And that was a really fun and easy way to engage individuals who wanted to go a little bit above and beyond the regular communication. We also attached to some existing and robust voter outreach. So we did reach out to the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, to see if we could get on their mailers. I recommend this for folks because these are mailers that are going to be going out anyway. And if you can garner that support and just attach your ballot referendum to those, that's a lot of essentially free marketing for you. So definitely do that outreach and see where you can tag along and use your networks. Hank was a big part of getting Nick Offerman to do a Instagram post for us, which was our most popular by far Instagram post. And he's in the region, so utilize him if you're going to referendum. I had my wedding in October and I put vote yes cards everywhere. And as I was thanking everyone in my wedding speech, I said, if you're a Cook County voter, get out and vote. So there are all different sizes. No network is too small to activate and have fun with. And next slide. I'm going to let Benjamin talk about this.
Oh, yeah, this is a lot of fun. So in the end, our polling, people really dog polling these days. And what people don't like to hear about polling is that often what happened was still within the margin of error. Our polling was dead on. It told us that we had X amount of support. And if we did X amount of work and ran a good campaign, we'd move it up 5 or 6 points. And so we knew we were right at about the 63% range. We got to 69%. Here you're seeing 75% of the vote in the city of Chicago and 63% of the vote in the suburbs, which was about 69% throughout the whole county, which interestingly is right in line with the just over 69,000, almost 70,000 acres there in the forest preserves. I like the kind of, the number match there. But, and, here we are, we moved that forest preserve budget up over $43 million a year. Their budget was around 120, 140 million when you start to talk about their debt, and the things, they break out the different things they spend it on. But anyway, it's been huge, and it's been up to all of us to keep an eye on what's been going on. We're happy to have the League of Women Voters who did a lot of work on this campaign, but also at the Forest Preserve meetings with us, friends, Open Lands, others are keeping their eye on the budget, making sure that what we said it was going to go to is what it's going to, and that's what we're seeing. It's really fun. I was there on this personal note, I was there for every meeting and all the things and did all this work. I think I took a vacation at one point where I wasn't available, but the day of the election, I got COVID. I couldn't go to the election party. I had not had it. I'd been COVID free almost 3 years. It was such a bummer. But anyway, I called my friends, at the party, and we celebrated. I think we're gonna go through lessons learned maybe now.
Yep.
Great. I think Brooke, you're kicking that off.
Great, thank you. Just to be clear, the Conservation Foundation, we were not involved whatsoever in the Cook County referendum. We watched on the sidelines in amazement at the level of complexity and scale at which you guys worked, and you guys just did a wonderful job. So congratulations. I'm Brooke McDonald with the Conservation Foundation. We work mostly out in the suburbs and the collar counties. And even though we weren't involved in the Cook County referendum, we've been involved in 14 referenda campaigns over the past 25 years, mostly in DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will counties. And each one of those have been successful. So we have a lot of experience at running these campaigns at a much smaller scale than Cook County. So, they invited me to come on just to talk about a few things. Just want to emphasize the importance of the poll. I can't emphasize enough how important that is and how that becomes a campaign Bible. It tells you everything you need to know to win these campaigns. The overall, goal of the poll is to really measure what kind of support you're going to have. Is also to test the ballot language and the amount of money, identify core supporters, core opponents, and most importantly, the battleground voters, which is when we do our campaigns, we focus a lot on our battleground voters. Also helps to identify political hot buttons. And as Emily mentioned, what are the key messages? We like to do polling between 400 and 600 people. These are randomly selected high frequency voters, people who we know who are going to vote in the upcoming election. And I think it's important to understand that these polls are political polls. They're not resident surveys. They're not user surveys. Forest preserve districts do those a lot. And those kind of surveys really provide a lot of great information to forest preserves for a variety of things forest preserves do. But when we do polling and when they do polling, it's a political poll. We're talking to people who we know we're going to vote in the particular election that we're focused on. And we just want to know, are you going to vote for this or not? And if you're not sure, what do we have to tell you to get you to vote yes? So it sort of boils down to that. So it's not a general type of survey. It's a very targeted political poll. We like to do phones. I know that there are some new techniques now that younger voters don't like to do phone surveys. So there are some online survey tools that pollsters are using now, but we've primarily done polls. We've probably done 25 or 26 polls over the past couple decades, and we just did 2 recently for a couple forest preserves out here in the suburbs. In terms of lessons learned, we'll tell you a story. There was a park district. I won't mention it, but there was a park district about 20 years ago who didn't do a political poll. They did just a normal survey. And the survey came back that their referendum was going to pass, and it was going to pass handsomely. And their executive director was out, telling people, hey, this is going to pass. We should put it on the ballot. They didn't do it the right way. And when it got to election day, they got smoked and he got fired. So just the importance of making sure that if you do a poll, you do it the right way, you do it with professionals, that people who are experts at this, and you're following scientific methods in doing these polls. And we've also done polls where the data came back and it wasn't that good. And that's okay, because the worst thing you want to do is get bad data or get data that's negative and not positive, and then spend all the time and all the money to run a campaign and lose. So it's okay to say the polling data is not good. The voters aren't supporting this right now. We're going to take a break and we're going to come back later. So we've had a few cases over the past 25 years where we've conducted polls and we've advised the agency that we're working with not to do it. And they understood, and they didn't do it, because if they would have done it, they probably would have lost. And we certainly wouldn't have been involved in helping to promote it. So a lot of people say, well, that's a waste of money on the poll. And it's not a waste of money. It's a waste of money if you have a negative polling and you do the campaign and lose. That's a waste of money. You learn a lot from these polls. Sometimes it's not good, and that's okay, but these agencies still learn a lot. So that's my lessons learned on polling data.
All right, next slide. Just to back to lessons learned 2, keeping messages tight and catering key messages to specific committees. This, again, goes back to the polling. When you get your poll back, you'll see the demographic breakdowns to really help you dig in with your consultants and your expert counsel from Brooke, from Trust for Public Land, the Nature Conservancy, to really think about the entire campaign strategy, which is who are we talking to about what, and again, keeping those messages really tight and also broad enough that they're actually inspiring. I mean, most voters and people across the region want clean air, want clean water, and I think doing this campaign really helped me think about the more accessible ways we all can talk about nature and what nature provides us from that health perspective. So just kind of lean into that, and don't be afraid to partner with your forest or conservation preserve district. They have the information you need also to tell your story, especially, what are you going to do if you win? What, as Benjamin said, what does all this money go to? That's a really fun story to tell, and I never get tired of telling it. Next slide.
Yeah, this one's pretty easy. We talked a lot about it, but fundraising for this, fundraising is often a dirty word. It sounds like you're selling people something. Just remember, people give to things that they believe in and that they want to support, and they're happy to do it. You can always ask people for too much money. They're never insulted by you asking them for too much money, because they then think you think they've got that much money, which is like kind of an odd compliment. But do your work, look at your databases, know what these folks might be about. There's a lot of folks who will donate to political efforts that won't donate to nonprofits. So there's some other avenues there that you need to look at and figure out who might be able to get in the mix. Again, it's about who knows who and who can make the ask, and then also use that fundraising as an opportunity to build your coalition, to find out, do those folks know other people, other organizations or groups that ought to sign on to your coalition, and get added to your website and be part of the support.
And so I think the next lesson learned is about building a strong grassroots coalition. I think we've already said a lot about that today. But the only thing I will add is that it's really important to bring as many voices as possible into the conversation, which, yes, we needed them for the purposes of this ballot measure, but we need them with us always. And so, like, we are also building knowledge and information among the broadest possible swath of our fellow citizens. So I think that's another reason why it's important.
Right. And lesson 5, retaining expert consultants. I would just say, you're not alone in this. If you've never done a referendum campaign, you have the Chicago Wilderness Alliance here to connect you to people like me or Hank or Benjamin, Carolyn, that are all willing to grab a coffee and support these efforts in whatever way we can. Use the people who have done many of these, the Brooks, the Will Abingers, the Isis Starks at the Nature Conservancy, and really, don't be afraid to ask for support where you need it. And this isn't on here, but have a ton of fun, because as Benjamin said, we had so much fun, and it was really a great opportunity to come together and nerd out about nature, especially after the pandemic when we were all kind of by ourselves out in public. But this was a great moment.
And, Emily used the occasion of her wedding to promote it. November 8th happened to be my birthday that year. I mean, it's always my birthday, but it coincided with the campaign. And so I was sorry that Benjamin wasn't there to celebrate the big win, but even more, missing the birthday.
You were our lucky charm, Carolyn. I think we're now ready to take any questions folks have.
I think we had one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then
yes.
I'm just gonna close with one last thought on lessons learned. So go ahead, Brooke, and then.
Okay, yeah. So think strategically about opposition. Emily and Benjamin have talked about that already. I just have a couple points here. I know it's hard to believe that someone would not want to support one of these referenda. We should have 100% support, right? But there are people who are, for whatever reason, don't support this. Our polling has showed that a lot of people love the forest preserves, but just because you love the forest preserves doesn't mean that you're going to give them any more money. So there are people who will oppose this. And I don't know if you have any anti-tax groups or if you ran across any anti-tax groups in Cook County, but out here in the collar counties and the exurbs and the rural areas, we have that. We're a little bit more conservative out here. And we've run into some anti-tax groups a few times. They haven't been a huge problem, but they're out there. And if they're well-funded and well-organized, they could cause a problem. I remember one conversation with a libertarian group out in Kane County who, they weren't against the forest preserves. They love the forest preserves, but, being, an anti-government type of mentality, they felt that it should be privatized and people should pay a fee to go to the forest preserve. So I don't know what you can say to people like that. But they do exist. But it's important to be aware if you have those kind of organizations and how large they are and how well organized and how well funded. When we first started doing these back in the late 90s, we reached out to the farm bureaus and the Realtors Association. And, we weren't able to convince them to support it. The farm bureaus tended to stay neutral. But we did have some problems with realtor associations. We don't anymore. We've spent a lot of time developing relationships with the realtors. In fact, we have two realtors on our board at the Conservation Foundation. One is the CEO for the second largest realtor association in Illinois, is on our board. So we've spent a lot of time working with realtors, getting them to understand that we sort of have the same mission. It's about quality of life. And by preserving land and having trails and communities, clean air and clean water, we're all helping to create places where people want to live, work, and raise their family, and that's good for realtors. So we've done a good job of, I think, getting the realtors on board to understand that having healthy parks and forest preserves are important. And then the last group here, and we've run in this a couple times, is I don't know what to call these people other than pissed off people. And these are people who, for whatever reason, the forest preserve did something in a forest preserve in their community, and they're just mad. And we had an issue in 2017 in Kane County, a large group of really strong conservation people who supported all the referenda in the past. They were mad at the forest preserve for something, and they protested and they campaigned against. And it still won, but it didn't win by as large of a margin that we thought it would. So, one thing we're talking to forest preserves right now about is, if you have any controversial issues that are upsetting people, let's try to get out ahead of those and talk to those people ahead of time. So, those things don't always pop up, but sometimes they do, and you just need to be aware of them.
So we'll get to questions as soon as I say that. One other thing about this is we didn't just win this issue. We really elevated the status of nature and the forest preserves in people's minds across the county. We took the opportunity with what we knew from the polling to put that in our messaging and to really bring that up. We had over 60 different bits of media coverage. We had both the Sun-Times and the Tribune endorse this. It was really great. And we had no opposition. We had the Farm Bureau said something on a post somewhere in a newsletter or something, but it wasn't that big a deal. Wendy, you want to lead us off, and then there's a question here in the chat that I'll go to next.
Well, I was just going to respond a little bit to what Brooke was saying, because while I was on the early fundraising phase and Benjamin, I would say that was a ton of fun, but it was fun by the end. But I actually we had a very huge cross section of political views and so forth, and I targeted a lot of the ones that I knew were very conservative and apt to be anti this. And I think it really comes down, because I was raising money from them, and I actually got quite a bit of money from these people. And I just told the story of why I was so committed to this. I mean, well, I had never been involved in any kind of political campaign actively. I mean, at this level. But I cared so much about the forest preserves, and just telling I just felt I needed to share the inspiration, that I have felt of why I wanted to be involved. And I just felt our conversations changing each time, and I didn't have one person turn me down for money, and a lot of them were fairly large donors. And they were at the extreme conservative, end of the political spectrum. So I think doing that early, knowing about it, the one that as Benjamin said, President Prankwinkle was really worried about particularly the one. We diverted that one. And in the end, there was no opposition, really. There was just no organized opposition whatsoever. And I will say that Cook County is different than the collar counties. I mean, I think it was a formidable challenge, but I like to talk about, you guys have talked about the team of rivals. In the end, it seemed to me it was a team of teams working in the same direction. And it was just well-oiled, and don't scrimp on quality. You really have got to get, the pros, and having TPL and TNC right at the beginning was key. Their pros, and then then it just kept trickling right down. It was just all so well oiled. So anyway, just wanted to interject that.
Thanks for that, Wendy. Yeah, conservation doesn't tend to be red or blue. People like nature, and they like somewhere to go and recreate. Grant Benjamin, great name, asked what was the Cook County impact like per voter. First, TPO will tell you that I think it's up to $40 a year is what people will tolerate for these types of things. We were more in the $20-$25 range. It was key for us to say that in months. If you say $20 a year, people hear a month. So be sure to break it down to your $1.67 or whatever the math is there. Sorry. But so we really phrased it like that. Brooke and I were going back and forth on a call about that the other day about how much we really would say. This is less than a cup of coffee. You know, it's $1.75 a month, whatever it is. And that's where we went with ours. I don't know, Joe. I think, again, you say quite a few referenda failed on Tuesday, that election. First of all, I think here in Chicago, the big one that was on, I'm not sure if we know for sure if it failed yet or not. It's not looking good for it. There's organized opposition, first of all, well-funded opposition. That says a lot. This was countywide. That's a lot different than a local school district or something like that. And I'm no expert. I talked to a pollster about it. They're the best ones to really, break it down for you, I think. Hank, I see your hand up. If anybody else is seeing more hands, please,
Yeah, I'm responding to what Joe said in the chat about quite a few referenda fail. What does that say for forest preserve referenda in the future? I think that it really has to be acknowledged that the work that was done, decision to go to referendum, was really important. Wendy in particular, Arnold Randall, Tony Preckwinkle, the reputation county has gotten good, and Benjamin, it's largely because of work like Friends of the Forest Preserves in Cook County too, but the basic understanding that this is a organization that is worth trusting, that's a big deal. And the partnerships and all the volunteers and the volunteer organizations that endorsed it support that idea. But there has to be a kernel of the organizations really going the right way, I think, for the integrity of the whole thing to hold water. And that worked for us very, very well. It was messaged extremely well, but underlying it all was this idea that we have a plan, we're going to raise money for specific focused purposes, and we're going to be accountable. That was very big. I think that may also be able to reach out to such a diverse group of donors because they are sophisticated and they understood that piece of it, and they were not throwing money at something that sounded good but might not pan out.
Yeah, and I would just add that, again, it kind of goes back to that polling, Joe, of those are specific campaigns, and they're going to have their reports where they look back and understand what the lessons learned are for those specific campaigns. You really have to be focused if you're going to go to ballot and be on a referendum campaign for your district, in that you're looking at the polling. You're looking at what key messages are move people and keep people on your side, and really, remain consistent. And as we've been talking about, build that coalition of support. I don't know if I would look to school districts and education as a comparison for forest preserve districts either. I think thankfully right now, knock on wood, as nature is a very purple issue, especially if you're hitting the right talking points. So it's important, again, to look at those top line messages from your poll and understand what's gonna have broad support. Brooke?
Well, here's just a fact. Not one countywide forest preserve referendum has failed in the last 25 years, and every single one of them had other competition on the ballot. Now, that doesn't mean that future ones will pass. There's no guarantee. But every time these referenda have been on the ballot, there's always something else on the ballot that people have to make choices. It's just interesting where people will go in and vote no for good things like schools, libraries, fire districts, things that you'd think people would vote yes for. But when it comes to this stuff, people tend to like it and they vote for it. And those are just the facts.
to this question in the chat about how do you feel about it might play out during a presidential versus a midterm. Midterm is a smaller election, less turnout, more difficult to generate the support. You get more of the strident voters who tend to be older. They might be more conservative. The feeling is definitely the presidential is easier. You get more people, a lot more voters. You get a lot more younger voters that are more likely to vote for this type of thing. But again, really, the story is told here by your polling. That's what really will tell you. And you know that if you run a good campaign, you're going to bump up whatever the polling's telling you by 4, 5, 6 points. And so, you know, and you're targeting, like Brooke has said, and we've said earlier, you're targeting the right people to make sure they know what it is, what they're voting for, why it's important. The difference here, too, that I would just mention, generally speaking, the difference between what you would be going for in a referendum like this versus what a school district or something else is going for is going to be a lot less money per month, would be my guess. Those school district ones tend to be a lot more money and are really, you know, just have a different impact. It's a different experience with schools. You know, they're hard to compare side by side. But generally speaking, TPO is telling us, Trust Public Land is telling us to go in the presidential. We didn't do that, and we still won by a lot. We won every ward and every township in the county, and it was great. More questions, folks? We still have plenty of time.
He has her hand.
Sorry, I don't see hands.
Wendy has her hand raised.
Oh, yeah, please, Wendy.
Benjamin, can I just add on to that? I maybe put lessons learned for the this goes beyond just the specific campaign, but it is patience, which goes along with the polling. I mean, he reminded you, you've said it, that we had 2 dead end starts. I think in 2019, was it? And I forget the dates exactly.
Yeah.
2018.
18, okay, 2018, and then the next one. The first one was because the polling was bad. We decided, okay, we'll stop. The next one, the polling was good, and we were terribly disappointed and thought, boy, we've really missed an opportunity. But who knew that COVID was coming along? And that turned out to be our best friend. So the timing, in timing you can't control. It's just, but timing really turned out to be, I think, one of the biggest factors here. And I think that the residue of that is still active. I mean, people have come to, during COVID, come to recognize how important nature was to them. And that is something they're willing to, put their money for it. So I agree that there isn't an apples to apples comparison between this kind of referendum and the school issues.
And I would also, go ahead, Benjamin.
I was just saying, Lake, someone's asking if we could flip back to the slide with all the supporters. We'd be happy to share that with anyone too.
And just along those lines, I would not say that your advocacy effort, your coalition building effort ends the day after the election. This is a movement for nature. So not thinking about this as a one and done approach, but from the Cook County perspective, we hope this is not the last referendum they go for. We hope they don't wait another 100 years. And it's important to continue telling that story and working with your forest preserves or conservation districts to tell that story of how that money is being spent as it's happening. We're just now starting to see the impact on the ground. Forest Preserves of Cook County has just done some acquisitions that we're really excited about. We're seeing the restoration really get started now. This coalition should be continuing to tell that story and working with the forest preserves to show that impact in consumable ways so that it's much easier next time you go around for the referendum.
Go ahead, Brooke.
I just want to reiterate what Wendy said. In 2019, we did polling in all 6 of the collar counties. This was right before, about a year before COVID, actually less than a year before COVID. And the messages surrounding mental health and the health of being outside, those rated well in 2019. In the polling we just did, we asked those same questions. Those messages went through the roof. And in our campaigns that we're going to be working on out here this fall, those are going to be key messages, which before they never were, but they are now. And I think COVID did have a lot to do with that.
More questions. I'm watching the chat too, if anybody has any. The other thing I would say, if you're one of those folks that'll come up with a question when you're going to bed tonight or wake up with it tomorrow morning, all of us are eager to help in any way that we can to raise more funds for conservation in this region. So please feel free to reach out with any questions. I've gotten some already. Any question is totally legit and welcomed. Again, Brooke's got a ton of experience, with 14 of these. We did a big one, recent one, and we're eager to share any thoughts or help you point you in the right direction, tell you, whatever challenges we had with our different, setting up the 501c4, finding a law firm to work with, or we can tell you who our consultants were. One thing we haven't mentioned today is we did hire 2 campaign managers. We wanted to hire one, and the one said, I'll do it if you'll hire this other person. So we did have full-time campaign managers that started kind of later in the campaign. We'd been well underway at that point. It made their job a little interesting because we were already kind of used to it, and they were supposed to then come in and lead us. They did a great job, and they really helped us, stay on track and get things over the finish line, and help us when this, as a group, we weren't quite making a decision. They'd say, okay, thanks for the input, and move it along. The overall, this says, we said it's not a marathon, it's a sprint. At some point, it really is a sprint, and things get a little tense. And one of the things that I remember clearly saying to folks that sometimes when we weren't on the same page, it was like, hey, we got 6 weeks. Let's just keep our eye on the prize, keep moving forward. It'll be over before we know it, and hopefully we'll all win and be happy. And so there was a little bit of, we don't all have to be on the same page. We'll just keep moving. Let's keep going. And so, yep. Laura, do you want to close this out here today?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. This was a great discussion. Thank you to all of our panelists for presenting. I appreciate the information. Please feel free to check out the recording. We'll get that posted this week and share that. And thanks again to the support from the U.S. Forest Service and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Urban and Community Forestry Program for bringing us these opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.